Happening now. We'd like to welcome our viewers from across North America and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room, episode 336 for September the 25th, 2024. My name is Wes Fryer. I am coming to you from Charlotte, North Carolina, where I am a middle school media literacy and STEM teacher, bracing for possibly a hurricane day on Friday. We may get 4 to 6 inches. Who knows what the projected category 4 Hurricane Helene will do once she makes landfall in the Florida Panhandle. But coming to us from a distant land, far, far from Hurricane Helene, is Guru of the North, Jason Neiffer, who appears to be in front of a beautiful Montana sunset, or at least a virtual version of one.
Yes, indeed. Good evening. My name is Jason Neiffer. I don't know what I'm trying to say here, and now I've disappeared into the sunset. Real floating head situation here. I am the executive director of the Montana Digital Academy, which is the state virtual school located on the beautiful University of Montana campus, located right here in Western Montana. And I'm actually using, I have to say, Mac OS 10 Sequoia is really good. There's just a lot of cool subtle features in there, including the Apple Intelligence, which we can talk about tonight. But because I did update to the Sequoia beta that allows you to access Apple Intelligence, and so I have that across all my devices now, which is pretty great. But I mean, just two examples of features that I'm using right now on my Mac Mini includes that there's a virtual background system, so you don't have to. In fact, the reason why it's showing up as weird is because last week upgrading to Sequoia did break my virtual background system.
Was that XSplit VCam did not work?
That's correct. Not working in Sequoia right now. Let's see, I need to turn, I would like that off. There we go. So that feature has been Sherlocked by Apple, which means it's been kind of built into that. And now not only can you control things like the lighting, or put it in portrait mode to blur the background, you can also pick a background yourself, right? So that's my messy office, which I do not want to show off tonight. And then that's just literally a photo of Washington Grizzly Stadium at the University of Montana. I was at the Pink concert a couple of weeks back and took this beautiful photo of the sunset from our seat. But you can now, there's some Apple Park photos that you can get in front of, and so that's super great. Or they have these kind of interesting color palettes. In fact, I was using this at the office today, and I got accused of just being in the sky, like I have just become part of the earth. But
is this an app, or how do you change these? Where do you?
Well, so there's a new control panel in this was in the last version, where when your camera's on, it gives you a bunch of options, right? And so one of them was reactions, right? And so when you go like this, it's not going to do it right now.
Oh, there yeah, we go. I remember that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's one thing. Reactions are fine. They're kind of weird. Like we really need pew 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 lasers in the background, but it now has a background feature, right? So it's just built right in, and you can choose from, and they have actually quite nice colors, and then you can literally pick an image from your computer or cloud storage, or just pick something right out of your photos. And so that's quickly tonight. That's what I popped up. But yeah, it's a super cool feature.
Can you use your phone as the camera?
Yes, you can. That's still available. And speaking of phones, also in Sequoia, you have the ability now to stream your phone onto your desktop. So right now I have my phone, like I can interact with it. It's like I'm using the phone, but it's on my laptop. And so the reason why that's really cool is that I have access to all my apps, including if I have a music app that is not on my computer, like if I didn't have Spotify installed on my machine, which I do, I can stream Spotify to my laptop or desktop and just listen to it through the speakers. And also I can interact with any app on here. So as an example of this, one of my favorite AI-driven apps right now, we've talked about it a couple of times. Snipped is the AI podcast app, which allows you to you get up to like 200 AI summaries a month of podcasts you do, but if someone else does it first, you can just access the results from their podcast analysis. But there's too many podcasts to listen to, and certainly not enough time. And for maybe 15 or 20 different podcasts, a lot of them are educational podcasts that I enjoy listening to. I just don't have time to. I'll use Snipped as a means of just seeing what's in there to see if that's something I want to listen to. But Snipped doesn't allow you to download it on an Apple Silicon Mac, which you can do with a lot of other iOS apps. They just don't allow it with Snipped. And so I always thought that would have been a really powerful feature if I could just have that on my laptop to be able to process through a podcast. But as it turns out, I don't need that anymore because I can just stream my phone to the desktop. And also note, I did end up, this is my iPhone 16 Pro Max. I end up paying $190 for it after trade-in and then T-Mobile discounts Arama. But it's so far it's pretty great. I mainly updated for battery life, and the battery life isn't super great on here. I think part of it is I turned on a lot of stuff for the purposes of Apple Intelligence. So, for example, for the first time in a long time, I set up the Mail app on here because that's what you have to do for it to access your email. And I'm pretty sure that's using quite a bit of battery in the background. So, and in fact, I can tell you that because, 21% of my battery use today was Mail, and I didn't even open Mail. So that's weird for sure. But I feel like that despite a lot of people saying that other than the Apple Intelligence stuff, that the new updates were boring, I couldn't disagree more. There are a lot of great new features across all these operating systems, and on Apple Intelligence is pretty great too.
And to be clear, you are running a beta. You're running standard iOS, but you're running a beta of Sequoia that is allowing you to have early access to the Apple Intelligence on the OS.
Yes, although I am also running the beta on iOS as well because I have Apple Intelligence on my phone, and I have to say, even right away, right, Siri's better with Apple Intelligence turned on. I'm still not super understanding like the access to all your information, right? Like it has access to all my emails now, and that part works okay. Not super great, but I think that's just going to improve over time.
Okay, and I have held off on updating this personal family laptop to Sequoia because of XSplit vCam. So you're saying not a problem. We can stream from the phone and virtual backgrounds. So that may be why XSplit vCam is not worrying about updating to Sequoia because it's been Sherlocked.
Yeah, I think that could very much be the case. But so I'm not using XSplit vCam right now. I have a virtual background on behind me. And it's missing some of the cool features of XSplit vCam. For example, it can create a lower third graphic, which is super cool. And we don't need it here because that's built into StreamYard, which is our streaming platform. But you can also have a video background, which I haven't really tried yet, but I don't think is available on the OS 10 Sequoia version. But it's good enough for what I would want to do, and it also means I don't have to have another app. I can have less apps. So I think that I don't know. I've heard some people call the other than the Apple Intelligence, the other stuff boring. I just don't think it is. I think that the stuff that they have released this year has immediately made an impact on my workflows.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that you're on the beta and you're the early adopter. Okay. Well, folks, if you're wondering, we had up to 4 live viewers tonight. We got a couple. So please say hi in the chat. If you're on Facebook, I don't know if we'll be able to see your comments. We haven't been able to stream to Facebook for a while because Meta or Facebook changed their rule. You have to have 100 followers, which doesn't sound like that much, but we just don't have that many on Facebook. Anyway, I decided, hey, I'm just going to stream to my channel, or to my main channel. So anyway, wherever you're joining us from, hello, and we will talk about our normal stuff. But if you don't know, Dr. Neiffer is quite the filter of EdTech tools, especially when it comes to AI. And Ideogram, I certainly count, Claude, and now Notion, which we're going to talk some more about in the show, all thanks to Dr. Neiffer. So this is it's valuable stuff, And I mean, in this world of, yes, pollution and misinformation, blah, 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 but just like so much information, as we serve as filters for each other, that is an incredibly valuable thing. And when you find people that you're like, hey, this is a person who, uses, in this case, different kinds of technologies and is doing this for teaching and learning, it's extremely valuable. So I appreciate the sharing. What is it, Dr. Neiffer, that we are going to allegedly do with 3 live viewers with us tonight?
Yeah, well, I want to say we're just going to ramble on about tech for the next 45 minutes, but we do have an agenda on the show. So the EdTech Situation is a once-a-week podcast where we look at the headlines over the last couple of weeks in the techosphere and kind of shoot that through the educational prism to see if we can help provide insights for our fellow technology enthusiasts to create what we hope is clarity in a world of occasional confusion. We have a series of links that we pick up every week. You can find those links at edtechsr.com/links. We have a massive size Google document there that you're more than welcome to peruse to find out what has been sparking our interest. But tonight we will have some AI news. I'm sure we will talk about social media. I have a one-time category called Information Wants to Be Free. Some security news. We'll probably talk about elections tonight, although not politically. And then we'll end tonight with our Geeks of the Week. Dr. Fryer, you did the lion's share of link work this week. In fact, I was kind of a lazy dog on links. I just copied some from last week. So if you have a place you'd like to start, let's do it.
Yeah. So as always, we've got more AI links than anything else, and we can probably legitimately change the name of the show to the AI Situation Room. But let's start with social media. And I think I got this from the wonderful podcast we both listen to, Hard Fork. This comes to us from the LA Times on September 23rd. Newsom signs California bill to limit addictive social media feeds for kids. Now, I don't have in here an article about all of the new changes that Meta that Meta has pushed out to Instagram, and I did learn a lot about that from Hard Fork. Basically, there's a lot of different, like we're talking over half of the states have different, bills and things before legislatures to try and address the crisis, which of course we've known about for a really long time, of social media and kids and, depression and, eating disorders and suicide and all these different kinds of things. And so this Los Angeles Times article is interesting because, what Meta and other tech companies are fearing is, regulation that is going to hurt their bottom line, and it's going to reduce the number of hours that folks spend on it, and it's going to be harmful. Well, this California bill is interesting because it is based on this idea that if a social media feed is not chronological, but it is curated, then it's going to be more addictive, and therefore it's going to be bad. And so the article says that it was a kind of an unusual collection of opponents. The ACLU, Equality California, representing folks like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, California Chamber of Commerce, and some of the arguments, they said this is going to place unconstitutional burdens. The legislation unconstitutionally burdens access to lawful content, setting up the potential for another lawsuit and court battles. Basically, there's a lot of folks that are upset, especially parents, with regard to social media and the impacts that it's having. But the question is, what can governments legally do? And do governments need to take action? Or should we allow the tech companies to simply regulate themselves? So, Dr. Neiffer, you've talked about the tech correction for a real long time, and that's what most of these bills are. It's there's different ways of responding to the tech correction. But do you have any thoughts about this? Do you think we should? Well, I guess in addition, and I don't know if we should grab an article that says this. Some of the things that Instagram and Meta is already imposing is like, not giving notifications within certain hours. The big thing is that parents are going to need to be connected to a child's account who's less than 18. It's not just 13. And they're evidently going to be out there trying to discover if kids are, creating false accounts or falsifying their birthday and things like that. It's to try and reduce the amount of time that kids and teens are on these platforms. So any thoughts that you have about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really blunt instrument to deal with a highly complex problem, and I think that's my overall reaction to these attempts at regulation. But at the same time, I did note that the bill does not take effect until January 1st, 2027. And my guess is that part of that was probably to take into account, potential lawsuits that will be filed against this bill. For example, Montana's TikTok ban, I think, is supposed to take effect January of 2025, and it's still.
It didn't get overturned by the courts yet, though. I was thinking that maybe it had gotten overturned.
I don't think it has, although that's a really good question. Montana TikTok ban. Yeah, I don't think it's a judge has halted it. But that was 9 months ago. So that's it's bipartisan, right? Like the kind of hate being piled on social media. I have a more educational take to it that I'll go to in a moment. But the bottom line is that it as much as I don't like this as the way to do it, like the blunt instrument approach, it's at least something. And my guess is that there may be a lot of 11th hour negotiations about ways that we can satisfy like the ACLU's concern. And I think it's a point well taken that big, broad blanket bans like this, even aimed at youth, are denying people access to information. When you think about where social media plugs into our culture and society now, it is a major channel of information, whether we like it or not. And that also applies to TikTok for the youths, that it is a major source of information, whether we like that or not. I still think the better way to do this is to embrace these tools inside of schools and help students develop skills to be good consumers of this information, right? But the super bottom line is that that ship has largely sailed on social media, and I don't like big broad strokes like this, but at least it's some regulation.
Yeah, well, and that's the question: is some regulation going to be better than none? It does appear that simply allowing the tech companies, and we could put AI into this as well, but I think AI is kind of at another level. Allowing them to just regulate themselves it just doesn't seem appropriate, especially when we talk about the stakes of things that we're talking about when it comes to AI. But yeah, this is just an area too where we see the ineffectual ability of government elected officials and leaders to compromise, especially around complex issues that are very fast moving. But in general, our government has difficulty passing some, substantial changes about anything. So anyway, this is not
the truth.
Okay. All right. Where do you want to go next?
Yeah, let me do another article that kind of intrigued me. That's also social media related. This is an article from Vox on September 18th. But Adam Clark Estes proposes the question of maybe we're wrong about what social media does to youth and youth mental health. And it's interesting because I've heard kind of two varieties of arguments related to this. The first one is that while there's a lot of association between social media and mental health for kids and adults, that there's very little evidence to suggest there's causation. So correlation and causation are very different things, and that if this was as bad as people would assume, or that people are claiming it is, that makes things a lot more complex. But more importantly, that all the moral and hysterical panic that's going on right now regarding social media may be just a convenient out for broader issues in our society. Right now, you could argue that perhaps that some of those broader issues were brought upon by social media. I have a former student that leaves social media every couple of years for 6 months and says, it's just a brilliant comment. She says, "I'm just not sure if we're meant to hear everyone's thoughts all the time." Right? Like, our brains aren't set up for that. And as I used to talk about, media, the availability of ubiquitous media, and this is before social media was even a thing. Like, the fact that 15 years ago you could, go to any newspaper's website and just get the news from that newspaper, where to do that, even 10 years prior would require, ordering a subscription or going to a newsstand that's got a lot of worldwide views, and it was impossible. And now, if you want to get information from 29 different locations, at the click of a button, you're able to do that. Maybe that's not healthy, right? Maybe that's just too much. It's information overload, if you will. But the bottom line is that I am glad that we're having these discussions. I think bans aren't nearly as effective as schools stepping in to do more media literacy. I think that would help quite a bit. But I do enjoy reading counterpoints to this, and I'm fairly convinced that social media has a negative impact on kids. I just don't think bans are the way to deal with it.
Yeah. Well, it definitely is something that has broad appeal. Jonathan Haidt is getting a lot of mileage out of his book. We've talked about him before on the show. Almost every single article that you're going to read about this is going to mention Haidt, and most likely, if you've got folks in your community who are advocating for a ban, Haidt and his ideas, even if they haven't read the whole book, are going to be a part of that. So I don't know. We do live in extremely tumultuous and what is it called? Rapid discontinuous change. There's just like so much change that is happening. So I think in those times, it's natural to be fearful. It's also natural to look for bad guys and for scapegoats and things like that. There's no doubt that these technologies are not only having an effect on youth and kid brains, but on adults as well. So I think it's valuable for all of us to take a look at our social media use and consumption. I haven't done a fast other than going camping, sometimes where it just happens because we're disconnected. But yeah, I like the counterpoint as well and appreciate you raising that issue.
Yep.
Let me do a quick security article. What we're doing, for those of you that may be with us live, we have a couple folks. Sometimes we can just jump down the rabbit hole of AI and never leave. So we'll sort of do a few things here before. I thought this was real interesting. This is an article about new guidelines from NIST. So this is from Ars Technica today. NIST proposes barring some of the most nonsensical password rules. Proposed guidelines aim to inject badly needed common sense into password hygiene. So if you're not familiar, NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They are a federal body, and governmental agencies, as well as many other organizations, even private companies, follow these. Government has to follow them. And so one of the things, it's been a while since we've talked about this, but, spoiler, shortcut, get a password manager, folks. Use a different password on each account and have that password manager generate a really long, I've been using 30-character passwords for quite a while. And so that's the short answer. But there have been some things that have been in the that have been part of cultural norms for lots of organizations, to include like universities and schools, but other organizations, like, we're going to have you change your password every 3 months or something. And what the article points out is that some of those rules and guidelines, also that you have to have these special characters, and it's real difficult sometimes to create the password because there's specific rules and guidelines that these different websites will impose. And so the new guidelines, and this is evidently a pretty hard document to, completely sift through, but some of the shoulds are changed to shalls. You've got to require at least 8 characters, but it recommends a minimum of 15. They are dissuading folks, I say folks, organizations, from forcing the password change. So, that is something I know as a password manager, user, I've been aware of, because what this points out, and they're actually putting it into their guidelines, if you ask people to change their passwords so often, they tend to adopt policies that are not password security friendly, like easier passwords or things that they write on sticky notes that they put under their keyboard, etc. So I think this was good. It begs mentioning, because we know that cyber events of all kinds with malware and bad actors trying to get people's information and identity theft, all that stuff is just continuing, and we hear all these hacks and times that your information is on the dark web. So I was glad that NIST changed their policies, and hopefully your organization is going to pay attention. If it's not a government organization, it's not going to have to, but if you find yourself being required by your IT department to change your password every few months, you might share this article with them, because NIST is as sort of authoritative as it gets when it comes to security advice in the United States.
Well, and the other thing I'll say about that too is that I hope that filters down into what I think is driving most of those rules now, which is cyber insurance. And I know that in context of, we've lost a lot of user rights at my institution. We're hosted on a university campus, and that wasn't a call that we got to make as an organization. Cyber security insurance has gone up dramatically in the last a couple of years, and one of the ways to deal with that is to shop around a little bit, and a lot of the organizations that offer reasonably priced cybersecurity insurance make very hardcore requirements that very little people get things like administrative access to computers, and when I understand, particularly that part, but when an organization like NIST, releases guidelines like that, I do feel like that's a good sign that perhaps even the cyber insurance folks will use that as best practice advice.
Yeah. All right. You haven't made a shift in your password manager use since we've talked about that last, have you? In terms of like switching?
No, I'm using 1Password, and I left there after LastPass was compromised. I did go in and change like 400 passwords over a series of a month, and it was quite unpleasant to go through that. But now the vast majority of my websites use a randomly generated 20 character or more password. And the other thing too is that the password managers, and I'm sure this is true of most of them, they're getting a lot easier to use, right? In that I know that I previously had problems with all of them on my phone, that there was issues frequently where I wasn't able to get to the passwords I needed to. I will also tell you that I only still kind of understand passkeys. I wish I understood them better.
We should talk about that on the show, because that's one of those things we're all being reminded to do, and we should talk about it. Because I've read some other folks who are very savvy that have said, I'm waiting because I don't want to be an early adopter with this, and I don't want to be quick out the gate. But yeah, it's related. That's a related topic to all this. Absolutely. I have another tool question. Back to Snipped. Sorry, I'm gonna jump around here. But do you still use Pocket Casts, or has Snipped replaced your pod? You do. So when do you flip over to Snipped? and then find that same podcast and then share parts of it, or what is your
Yeah,
usage?
or there's maybe I'm subscribed. Well, actually, no. I sent and I can't remember the name of the format of the file. The list of podcasts that you're subscribed to.
OPML.
Yeah, OPML. So I exported my OPML from Pocket Casts and inserted it into Snipped. So I have access to all my podcasts there, but I'm only going there for like a lot of the education podcasts, and even when they're valuable, sometimes they're a little long, and I won't mention names, but they drone on a little bit. But the information is super valuable. So in fact, I've been listening to a lot more lately to alternative assessment podcasts, where a couple professors are tossing back and forth some concepts. But I go back there if I don't want to listen to the full hour, but I want to get the content, right? I want to understand what they're talking about.
And what's so fascinating is we are just, maybe weeks, months away. We're not a year away from, I think, being able to have agents that we create, which could do things like, hey, I want you to grab the transcript or create the transcript of all these podcasts, and I want you to filter for these things, and I want you to give me these summaries. The creator of Wolfram Alpha, if I even say that right, was on a podcast a couple summers ago, I guess, and he was talking about AI and how he was using these algorithms that he had written to scour the web for research articles that were of interest to him, and he was able to be so much more productive in identifying the articles that he wanted to read and getting summaries and all this, and that was years ago. So the maturity of these tools is just pretty staggering, and as we'll talk about as we transition over to AI, which we may want to do here, that world of customized agents that we have doing our bidding is rapidly becoming a reality. Yeah. Anything you'd like to do before we jump over to that one?
No. In fact, the article I do want to do is an AI article too. So let's go ahead and just jump into AI articles.
Go for it.
Okay. Well, let's see. Well, let's start with Sam Altman, because he's been making a lot of news as of late. And I saw a lot of last minute headlines today before we jumped into the podcast. The CTO of OpenAI quit today, which is the chaos that's going on there, I think, is kind of terrifying, because and sometimes that there's good information and sometimes there's not. And it also sounds like too that the Silicon Valley rumor mill is alive and well with AI stuff. So I'm almost certain that impacts it as well. But I think this is your article, Wes, but Sam Altman says that AI superintelligence may be just a few thousand days away. So we're talking about 5 to 6 years is what he's speaking of there
at most.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that would say that there's a creepy element already of superintelligence in all these AI models. So we're just going to have to see. But a lot of big broad plans that are coming, and the intelligence age term is being used a lot. That's the era that we're entering in. For some reason, that
was a reason to celebrate, maybe.
Yeah, apparently so.
Intelligence age is the AI overlords. They liked that. They sent you balloons for that comment, Jason.
Yeah, and so that's why I'm trying to be nice to the machines. Certainly within the next decade, that we should be able to see that. And I also think too that his vision, which is that we as individuals can start to build kind of like teams of AI agents around us to help us with our daily work and daily tasks. But also the groups of AI agents could end up joining teams of researchers, teams of school administrators, teams of teachers, teams of students, to be able to provide a lot of extraordinary intelligence bandwidth to these processes. And I already kind of see the way that might look, right? Again, a little terrifying, that we seem to be, heading into this with very little in the way of ethical policies or other pieces developed. But like that's it's just super interesting to me how it plays it out. So I know, Wes, you shared this article. What are your thoughts?
Well, back to the first one, that was Ars Technica. OpenAI's Marathi shocks with sudden departure announcement. In addition to the departure of the CTO, that article reports that OpenAI is going for profit. And so this is something that Elon had been critical of the company because that was not originally the deal in terms of the companies that had invested in it and the ways that they were supposed to operate. And there were rumors at the time that Sam Altman was, I guess, temporarily fired and then brought back on, that might have had something to do with it. So that's out in the open. They're going to go profit. The article that you mentioned in Ars Technica from September 23rd is referencing a post, an article that Sam Altman wrote on his own website called The Intelligence Age. And so he is predicting a wonderful future of lots of prosperity for everyone, but it's going to require lots of silicone and lots of energy. And he says that if we don't make these, huge investments, then this is, AI is going to be something that just the wealthy are going to have and people are going to fight over, and that's going to be a real problem. The thing he says that caused all this, and it just blows his mind, is that deep learning worked. And he says it in 15 words. Deep learning worked, got predictably better with scale, and we dedicated increasing resources to it. And so we've talked about, and people are hopefully familiar with Moore's law, the doubling speed of processor power generally every 18 months, observed by Gordon Moore, and it's been true for a real long time. Well, the same sort of exponential improvement is being seen with these deep learning AI models. The more compute and data that's available, it's sort of like feed the beast, and it just gets incredibly more capable. And so not only Altman, but others I've been reading, and also a really good friend of mine who graduated a year ahead of me in school, and I think in 2005 did a podcast interview with me where he was talking about neural networks. Now, neural networks in 2005, that was pretty ahead of its time. All of these folks that I've been, and I'm not saying everyone out there, but a number of people that I really do trust and respect, don't see this slowing down anytime soon. There are certainly energy, challenges, but I think Altman's article is worth taking in. We need to realize that he is a big fundraiser and part of the projection of AI hype and the wonderful future that it's going to bring in, is to try to get more investment. I will say, not to get too political, but I think we're going to have an important role for government. We're in a new Gilded Age. We have extreme rich-poor gap and widening income gaps. And so I think that's going to be something we're going to have to deal with as we look towards the real long-term future. But on the jobs front, and this is interesting, what Altman says in this article is he does say that the labor market, and his terms are really interesting, right? In terms of the future, he says a few thousand days? No, something like that. It's basically saying, in a few thousand days, how long that is, that could be, 5 or 6 years, it could be less. But he's also talking about, I think in pretty general terms, but it's a pretty big prediction that labor markets are going to have huge impacts. And he doesn't think all jobs are going away, but, kind of like the lamplighter of bygone days. We'll look back on some of the things that people do and get paid for today, and we go, can you believe that people did that full time? So it's worth reading, but certainly with a critical eye and mind. And I continue to find it incredible what the capabilities of AI are. I know we're going to talk about Notion and some other things, and we talked about Notebook LM last time. I did some more experiments, and my mind just got blown again. So I don't know. Do you think is Altman a prophet, Jason? And should we accept everything that he prognosticates?
Yeah, I mean, your to your earlier point about how he is trying to sell this stuff to raise money, and one of the other headlines I saw before we jumped in was that their switch from a nonprofit to a for-profit is likely going to give him a stake in OpenAI. Sam Altman doesn't need money because he himself is an extremely wealthy person, and in fact, you'll frequently see now. References to his wealth. He invests a lot in startups, as it turns out, and so he and I think he's got a good eye for things. That's a different thing than being a visionary leader. But he's optimistic. But what I would say though is that we need all these voices, right? I wish it was as easy as saying that it's all negative or it's all neutral, but I think we need a lot of positive voices in this too, because we're gonna have to figure this out one way or another, or I think humanity is at risk. And that sounds so bold, but it's true, right? I really do believe that we're embarking on a pretty extraordinary time for sure.
Let's see. I got this in the same article series that we were talking about with was that with the ChatGPT? Snapchat. Oh, okay. No, this was from the Meta stuff. So let me do this first article, then I'll do the second one about Snapchat. Big event, Meta Connect 2024 in Gadget, September 25th. Has an article, everything announced at Meta Connect 2024. And so you've got some, less expensive, slightly $300 VR headsets. You've got some updates to their AR glasses, augmented reality, that won't be sold for a little while. And you've got, the discontinuation of certain things, and Ray-Ban's updated. It's nothing, I think, that's really earth-shattering. But what is a pretty big deal is that Meta has decided to start putting AI images, which could include yourself, into their feed that they're going to show you. And this article was, I think it was in this first one. This was from September 17th on The Verge. Snapchat's AI selfie feature puts your face in personalized ads. Here's how to do it. Now, I do have an account on Snapchat. I don't think I've used it in over 2 years or more. It's been a long time. That's one tool I just don't use. In order to use their My Selfie feature, which was really popular when it came out, that uses AI, you had to just, of course, tap, I accept your terms. Well, one of those terms was, you agree to let us use your face in ads that will show you. And I thought that was really interesting. And then this decision by Meta to go ahead and move forward, and maybe, okay, there it is. It's another article. It wasn't in Gadget. That was the first article there. So this is The Verge today. Meta's going to put AI generated images in your Facebook and Instagram feeds. I don't think I like this. The idea, again, it's algorithmically generated feeds, and it's all about engagement. I don't know. I like the fact that both with Facebook and Instagram today, when you post an image, there is a little button that you click. If you have created it with AI, you indicate that it is, you disclose that. I don't know. What do you think? Are you ready for this?
Yeah, I mean,
that's a fairly strong no, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I get the gee whiz of that, right? Like, it's not like it's not interesting, but yeah, I'm not ready for that.
And these things are going to touch lots of folks, right? The numbers of users that Facebook and Instagram have, lots and lots. So it'll be interesting if there is pushback to this. And that's interesting too, right? Using your own picture in an advertisement that's going to market to you. So the psychology of that is pretty wild. Did you know, by the way, that ChatGPT has got like 9 voices that you can choose?
Yes, and are you talking about the new voice mode, right?
Yeah, I've been talking with my iPhone primarily quite a while, but then I was reading some of these articles and I went into the settings and lo and behold, there's like 9 choices. So
Yeah,
there were just a
yeah,
few.
and I'm glad you mentioned this because I wanted to talk about this too. So the new voice mode, which has been teased for months now, right, is finally rolling out, and I was able to get into it yesterday. But just giving you the quickest of quick demos, it is a lot more natural than just the former ChatGPT voice mode. But I'll start it now. And of course, it's a lot slower when I want to show it off, right? Although I imagine part of it is that servers have to be pretty overloaded with people trying to use this
It's
stuff.
great audio, folks.
Yeah, it really is. Even if we can't get there. And I think I mentioned this demo a couple of episodes ago, but my favorite voice mode demo is to tell ChatGPT to listen to you ramble about stuff, right? And you could even do something that I like to do is say, every time I pause, tell me you heard me or tell me that continue, and then I'll let you know when I'm done talking completely, and then asking it to turn that into something else, right? Or turn that into organized notes. Or the demo that I did today with, oh, here we go. Good evening, ChatGPT.
Good evening. How's your day been?
Pretty rockin'. How about yours?
I can't experience days myself, but I'm here and ready to chat. What's on your mind?
Well, I'm here doing a podcast with my buddy Wes.
Sounds like a great time. What's your podcast about?
It's about educational technology.
Nice. Educational technology is such a fascinating field. There's always something new emerging. What specific topics are you covering in today's episode?
Well, as a matter of fact, we're talking about you.
I'm flattered. Discussing AI and education, I assume? There's a lot to unpack there.
Yep, absolutely there is. Hey, Wes, say hi to ChatGPT.
Hey, ChatGPT, this
Hey,
is
Wes.
Wes.
Nice to virtually meet you. How's it
Hey,
going?
it's going great. Can you do me a favor? Give me a quick bio of Jason Neiffer. I wonder if it can hear me. Is it processing?
I don't know. Did you hear Wes?
No, I didn't hear anything from Wes. I'm all ears if you want to share what he said, though.
Yeah, he asked, can you write a quick biography of Jason Neiffer?
I'm sorry, but I can't provide real-time or updated information on individuals. If you have any other questions or need assistance with something else, feel free to ask.
Do you know what Jason Neiffer is known for?
Yes, Jason Neiffer is known for his work in the field of educational technology. He's been involved with the Montana Digital Academy and has been a strong advocate for online learning and innovative teaching methods.
Thank you. That was very useful. Can you tell me
Of course.
a knock knock joke?
Sure. Knock knock.
Who's there?
Lettuce.
Lettuce who?
Let us in. It's cold out here.
He.
Glad you enjoyed it.
So,
Yeah.
Jason, soon I think we will be able to have AI voices in the podcast if we want. Those could be, AI personas that we train. You talked about Notebook LM and demonstrated that in last week's show. It relates to one of my Geeks of the Week. It's phenomenal what Notebook LM is able to do at this point. So evidently Sundar Pichai had teased that at the last Google I/O that Notebook LM and these tools are going to be able to provide that. So isn't that going to be incredible? And are we going to want to even do that? But imagine, a third party, for instance, being here. And what I do on your prompt thing is I'll say, please respond when I pause with the word okay, and do not process until I say the word process. And that has been you said that weeks ago, and that really has helped my frustration level, because when I'm trying to get my thoughts aloud and I'm just saying them, a lot of times I'm not doing that constantly. And so I would pause and it would start to process too quickly. So that's a great tip.
Yeah, and also, so it's funny you should mention that. Next week I have a wonderful opportunity, and by the way, I'm going to be gone next week, but and the week after, I'm going to be in Arkansas for the Virtual Learning Leadership Alliance annual conference, and the VLLA is the State Virtual School advocacy group, and it's amazing to be around so many other people kind of in this field, and I cannot wait to talk to and hang out with my colleagues there. But the executive director of Michigan Virtual, Jamie Fitzpatrick, a longtime friend and distance learning leader, he sent out a thing today where you could call this phone number and you could talk to the AI, or the AI would take would give you a survey. And what he wanted to do was have it be they're going to use that to create kind of a document about where VLA members are on AI. And so it was anonymous responses, but you call the number and it talks you through the survey questions. And so I completed it today. So did my colleague and buddy Mike. He is a different kind of talker than I am. I tend to be, pretty quick, a lot of thoughts come into my head, not a lot of pausing. Mike is much more thoughtful than I am before things come out of his mouth. And so he noted that when he was kind of considering the question or thinking about what he wanted to say next, the AI was jumping in too quickly, right? And so I thought that was kind of an interesting observation on his part as well. But if you think for a moment what the implications could be about calling up an AI bot that's trained on X, Y, and Z, or even taking things like student surveys like that, that's a pretty incredible thing.
Absolutely. Well, I kind of feel like it might be good. I want to hear about Notion, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about that. Is there an article or two you want to get to before we jump into that? Because I would like to visit about that a little bit, and I know that touches on Geeks of the Week.
Yeah, let me see here. Well, there's the Ars Technica article about talking to ChatGPT is a surreal experience. I would agree with that. One of the suggestions I make, and I think I've made this one here in the past, is that it's a really great commuter buddy, right? And so the way it works in my car, and I wish it worked a little differently, but the way it worked in my car is that when I press the button, it essentially starts a phone call on my Bluetooth in my car. So I'm able to talk back and forth with it. And even before these new features that make the conversation much more conversational, it was very, very functional. And if you can't imagine why you might use a ChatGPT's voice feature in this way, tomorrow morning, if you've got the access and the wherewithal to do it, just talk about an issue that you want to talk through. A couple months ago, I was giving a presentation to a group of faculty, and on my way there, I had a 2-hour drive. And I wanted to develop some metaphors for the purpose of kind of helping explain some of the technical bits of that. And I spent 20 minutes talking back and forth with it. We came up with some great things together. And then I said, please summarize everything we've talked about. And then when I got to my destination, I just went into the app on the computer, and there was the history of that conversation and doing that. And, as a thought partner, especially if you don't have access to a thought partner all the time, right? I mean, I think we've talked about this before. One of the reasons why Wes and I do this podcast isn't the millions of dollars of sponsorships. It's because we like tossing these things back and forth, right? It's important to our own professional learning. And I feel like that's a real opportunity for you to understand maybe how these chat models could impact teaching and learning.
And I will share that this weekend I was talking to ChatGPT about some different issues, and at one point it really took on the sound of a counselor with some of the things that I was doing.
Yeah.
And it also, just helped me brainstorm for this article that I'm looking at writing, drafting an abstract, outlining things. I mean, it's phenomenal. And I have not worked. I have not worked with a personal assistant to me, even when I was a tech director.
Yeah.
But it's just having that kind of an opportunity, because this is the thing that really blew my mind. And I even said this as I was talking to it. It's wild interacting with this voice, which, very much makes you feel like you're interacting with a sentient being. And I know that it has ingested and, quote unquote, read, watched, consumed far more content than I will ever probably consume in my entire life. And there were so many things that struck me about this, but one of them is how critical the questions are. It's just that simple, prompt window and being able to just ask questions. But wow, it is, if you have not been spending time with AIs, and I would again say definitely talking with it, it's a different experience when you are talking with it. It's talking back to you. Part of that is because the bandwidth is so much wider, because even if you are a pretty fast typist, typically, at least for me, when I'm speaking, I can just talk a lot faster than I can type. So it blows my mind, and I'm glad that there's new voices. I just reset a voice, and I'm gonna keep exploring it in that way and using it as a thought partner. So yeah, who would have thought that your commute would not just have great podcast opportunities to hang out with folks' minds, but you're going to be able to have this kind of an interactive banter back and forth that can really be productive, and it's all archived to go back in there later and copy and paste.
Yeah, which is itself a really powerful feature.
Let me share this one article, then we'll do our Geeks of the Week. This is, and maybe you can help me understand exactly what we did here. This is Ars Technica from yesterday, from September 24th, by Dan Gooden. Hacker plants false memories in ChatGPT to steal user data in perpetuity. And the subtext is, or the byline, emails, documents, and other untrusted content can plant malicious memories. And so a security researcher had found this vulnerability, and I'm guessing that it means that they have to have access to somebody's ChatGPT, which makes me wonder. I haven't turned on two-step, maybe, and I should probably turn two-step on. But they can access and influence the user's long-term memory settings, and so they basically created a proof of concept and demonstrated this, and finally the OpenAI engineers took notice and have had a partial fix. But this idea, because we'll hear about injection vulnerabilities and things that MySQL and things that are happening on web servers and Linux, but language learning models evidently are subject to this as well, where information can be put in this case it was blog posts, emails, documents, and then ChatGPT would believe that, like, oh, you're 102 years old, you live in the Matrix, you believe the world is flat. These were examples that they used, but these were false memories that were planted into the AI. So if you didn't think we were living in a science fiction novel yet, we are.
Yeah. Well, I'll even go a step further there. Like, I thought about that, not in that way. That's way deeper than my thoughts went. But remember we talked about, this was probably like a year and a half ago, that a law professor had found that his name was being associated with sexual assault, right? And it wasn't true, right? And that phenomenon,
the AI was responding about that.
Right. Yeah.
It would other people would ask it. It would respond and say this false correlation or connection.
Right. And the part that I was thinking about is that, especially if you don't have safeguards turned on, or depending on which version of a large language model you're using, it trains off of you, right? So I don't know if we've ever talked about reputation management companies, but it's big business in the world to get negative stuff off the internet about you. Businesses do it all the time. I've seen dozens of articles where people will leave a negative review for a restaurant or something, and then and then they'll threaten to sue the individual that left the review. But I would imagine that reputation management is working on ways to tweak AI, right? And if you could just,
it's like SEO, search engine
yeah,
optimization. They're going to try to figure out how to optimize their result within the AI and the LLM.
yeah, yeah. It's different than that, but that's what I keep thinking about, is that if it is training off of our data, then that also seems like an opportunity to tweak the cloud brain, right? Like that you may be able to, find a way to easily push those models. And I would also say too that, I have no evidence of this and I have not read anything like this, but almost certainly bad actors internationally are also trying to tweak our models in that direction too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, sir, I think we are at the top of the hour. We had probably better Geek of the Week it. So let me do mine. Well, no, you go ahead, because I want to mention some Notion stuff off of what you're going to do probably.
Yeah, so I've talked about Notion a couple of times in the past, but Notion is there's a category of tools that are, Evernote is one of them, Obsidian is one of them, but it's basically a personal information manager, and I see it as just a vast dumping ground for all of my information that I then try to organize and find later. And Notion really did revolutionize this for me, because I had been using, things like Google Keep and Apple Notes, and those tools are fine, but they're not cross-plat. Well, they are cross-plat, or at least the Google ones are, but it just wasn't really what I was looking for. And so I had about a year ago looked into Notion, but it seemed like way more complex than I wanted to get into. Well, it's because I was looking at the super productivity hackers and how they were using it. So I just started. I just downloaded it and started dumping information in there, and it's pretty great a place. It's got, now for me, I have dozens of tools dumping information in there all the time. It's easy for me to find it later. But today, actually, they released some new features, and those features are AI based, and you have to pay extra for Notion AI. That's an $8 add-on a month, but you get access to a bunch of really functional models to be able to realize that. But the power feature that I'm actually in the process of setting up tonight is that one of the AI connectors that you can do is Google Docs, Sheets, and Slides. So when you ask Notion AI a question, one of the things that we'll do is go into your Google Docs and look for information there. One of my longtime criticisms of Google Docs is the search is frigging terrible. It's so bad, and it's Google, right? Like, you invented search, so you should be great at this. It's not, but I cannot wait to plug this into my various Google Drive accounts, because now I'll have an interface to really find stuff that I otherwise wouldn't be able to find.
It's going to be super interesting, and hopefully you'll have insight into the documents that it does and doesn't use, right? Because if people share documents with you, are those going to be part of the database, and is it going to assume that everything in there is true and valid? Because back to that article I just shared about security and people injecting false information into the LLM that it would believe, what is the training data? So that is, and if you wrote some, let's say, fiction or a novel or something like that, and maybe it was autobiographical or whatever, like, what's the AI going to make of that? Is it going to know this is, Jason writing some fiction, or is it going to think that is the gospel truth, and it needs to use that as part of its, library of knowledge that it's going to base its opinions off of? Just wild. Okay, well, my Geeks of the Week, two of them. Last show, Jason talked about Google LM. And by the way, folks, if you have not played with Google LM, this is your homework. Okay, I'm doing Notion as well, and I'll talk about that. But right after the show, I grabbed a paper I had written as a senior at the Air Force Academy 33 years ago, and I threw it in there, and lo and behold, it created this almost, 8-minute really good podcast discussion between what sounded like a woman and a man talking about my article and highlighting the issues and asking questions and, having the sorts of analysis and reflection that you would expect on a podcast. But it was just all about this paper. And so I ended up grabbing that, throwing that up on YouTube, and writing a blog post. So I've got that blog post. But then I've gone ahead and set up a webinar, Dr. Neiffer. So I am taking over the, at least for the next 3 months, maybe for longer, the Media Ed Club for the Media Education Lab. And this group has monthly webinars that are generally the first Monday of the month at 12 noon Eastern time. And so the first webinar that I'll be hosting will be coming up on October 7th, and it's called AI, Notebook LM, and Stephen Johnson. So we've got some videos and resources from Stephen Johnson, who's one of the collaborators with Google on Notebook LM. I did reach out to him. It would be like a real long shot to get him on the show. But this will be an opportunity to learn a little bit more about Google LM and hopefully have some other people share their experiences of what they have done with the tool. And we're going to be talking about, Renee DiResta's book, that she published, I think, this past summer. And anyway, there's a couple other things that we've got slated for November and December. But thank you so much for recommending Google's Notebook LM. And it is a mind-blowingly powerful tool that I want to continue playing with.
Yeah, and I will tell you that the number of use cases I figured out for it just in my day-to-day life is pretty extraordinary stuff.
And I've also started to play with Notion, and I was trying to use ChatGPT to sort of build my own DIY task manager, which I know there's a lot of, and I've used different ones, but I was able this week to successfully import over 400 tasks and ideas. These aren't just all tasks, like blog post ideas and other things, but they're all imported, and I'm using it, and I'm using the mobile app as well as the web page, and I'm really intrigued with the database possibilities and also what API kind of connections could be made here. And so, yeah, excellent to check that out. Well, Dr. Neiffer, when you're not here on our show, where can people find you and how do they connect with your mind digitally?
The best place to go is my half-done webpage, which has been half done for like a year, aicentrist.com. And then, I don't know, I kind of hang out on Twitter a little bit, but the best place really to have to be part of the where I think the discussion is going on about AI in education right now is on LinkedIn.
There you go. And you can find me at wesfryer.com. If you click the connect link to wesfryer.com/after, there are a lot of different channels and places where I am sharing resources. But this has been the EdTech Situation Room, our almost weekly podcast that we have been doing for a number of years. Seeing that we're on episode 336, we've been here for a while. Glad to see more live viewers. I will probably attribute that to Facebook. If you've listened to the show, whether you tuned in live or you caught us after the fact, please let us know. Reach out. We've got some links on edtechsr.com. And that's where you can also download small MP3 versions as well as more compressed audio as well as video versions. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Maybe someday we'll have over 100 followers on our page. Like us on Facebook and help us get there. We'll stream there again. But we will be off the air for the next 2 weeks. So if you want to follow us on either Facebook or on Mastodon, those are probably good places. Jason and I may cross-post that too, our respective LinkedIns and other places. But until next time, we encourage you to stay savvy, stay safe, and please share the EdTech Situation with others, as well as take some time to play with some of these AI tools that we've talked about, like Notebook LM and Notion. Have a great couple weeks, and we'll see you all in a few.
Good night.